Hello, Gothic literature lovers and horror fans. I am J.S. Larimore, aka Jax, and today in the studio I have with me Clay Vermulm. He is the author of the novella Crevasse and the co host of the podcast Fermented Fiction. So today we'll be discussing his story, Crevasse, and his podcast, and our shared interest in horror movies. So without further ado, welcome to Ravens and Writing Desk. Hello. With me today, I have Clay Vermulm. He is the author of Crevasse and a podcaster. Go ahead and remind me the name of your podcast.
It's called Fermented Fiction, and
Okay,
it's the
awesome. Go ahead, sorry.
the podcast of the Cascade Writers here in Washington State.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I want to talk to you about that for sure. But first, I want to hear a little bit about you because we kind of met on the fly on Twitter. So tell me about yourself, your hobbies. Let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. I am from a small town in Montana. I grew up on a farm, and since nobody's come along to ask me to save the world yet, I assume they're not going to, and I started writing instead. Um, I've worked a lot of random jobs, like most creative people, I think. From kitchens to I was in the Seattle film industry for a few years as well.
Oh,
Um, Moved out here after I finished college in Montana. I was a teacher for a couple years. That's what I got my degree in. But always kind of leaned towards the creative work. And once I got into the film industry, I dropped teaching. And after doing film for a while, I was like, well, I don't want to need like 40 people and $100,000 to like do anything. So
right.
I, it's brutal out there.
Yeah.
Um, so then I kind of like gravitated towards writing my own stories. That was always the aspect of film I was most excited about anyway, was create the creative aspects.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, and horror's always been my jam. I'm a history major, so with kind of a focus on like folklore and world history. So I've always been a big
Oh, very
fan of
cool.
folklore and supernatural stories from all over the world. So that's definitely what I'm into.
Very cool.
And in terms of hobbies, I do a lot of outdoor stuff. I do a lot of backpacking, hiking, climbing, rock climbing, and a little bit of surfing. I suck at surfing, but I do like it. um, so most of my stories, I should say, and my two books I finished are both are all kind of like adventure horror. A lot of them take place out in nature.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of focused on writing stories that happen in Washington now or Montana, the places I know and explore a lot. And
Right.
yeah, that's kind of what I'm
So
up to.
you do a lot of hiking in like a Pacific Northwest area.
Mhm.
I know it's not Appalachia per se, but there are a lot of creepy stories that come out of that area as well. Have you ever experienced anything while you're out there?
I'd be lying if I said I ever experienced anything like supernatural. I wish I would have. I'm open to it,
Right.
but no, I haven't. I've gone to some of the haunted places in Washington. I've had a couple of creepy encounters with like animals. I have been
Yeah.
stalked by not one but two separate mountain lions. So
Mm.
that's not fun. Uh, but
Yeah, I ran into one once. I lived in Arizona and
mm,
came about face to face with one. It's not fun.
no, no, that's terrifying. I mean, I have a house cat. She's actually right here, but um, imagining her being any bigger than she is a terrifying prospect because sometimes they just
Yeah,
decide they want to murder you, and you're like, I thought we were
exactly.
friends.
So
Um,
tell me about some of the haunted places in Washington. That's
well,
exciting.
yeah. So there's like an old asylum in Cedro Woolley area, which is I don't know if you know Washington places, but like
Not really, just like I've been to the Spokane area, but that's it.
okay, yeah. So like if you go like 2 hours north of Seattle, basically, um,
Okay.
you get pretty out of the city pretty fast after you pass a city called Everett, which is where I live. Then it starts to get quite a bit more rural, and then especially if you get off the I-5 corridor, it gets pretty rural, and like it's a jungle out in the Cascades and stuff. It's very thick wilderness, woods and mountains, and it's pretty rugged. But Cedro Woolley is kind of like it's an old mental asylum that was shut down when most of them were.
Yeah.
And now it's just it's kind of overgrown, and there's a bunch of buildings, and it's super creepy. So I went and explored around there a little bit. That was pretty fun. I camped out there for a night. Um, we went over to
Brave.
the Manresa Hotel. Yeah, I mean, luckily, nothing happened, or unluckily, I guess, depending on how you look at it. Went to the Manresa Hotel, which is like a haunted hotel in Port Townsend. Like Ghost Adventures has been there and stuff.
Oh, very cool.
So that was really fun. I totally botched that one though. My wife will never let me live it down because we went to do this paranormal like investigation there. We were trying to, not like serious or anything, just like stay up and see if we see anything together. And I fell
Right.
asleep at like midnight.
Oh no.
I totally blew it. And she was kind of nervous actually about being there. So
Oh, you
then
left
she
her
was stuck up
alone?
all night. I know I left her alone. I suck. Um,
Oh,
she still got married to me, so that's on her.
she
Because
must really like
that was
you.
before before we were married. Um, and then where else did we go? Oh, we went to Starvation Heights. I don't know if you've heard about that, but that's a super creepy like Washington story. There's this woman who I forget her name, but she was running a basically a like uh I guess you'd call it therapy service,
Oh,
but
neat.
super gross. It was like it was to help people get healthy, and basically people were essentially like starving to death, and she was running a very unhealthy practice.
Oh, that's
Um,
awful.
yeah, and a bunch of people died. There's a bunch of like yeah, you can look it up, Starvation Heights in Washington, but the super gross.
Oh,
There's like it's got its own cemetery, so that's all you really need to
oh,
know
that's
about it.
awful.
Um, but yeah, so that was kind of creepy. I mean, the cemetery there and stuff is pretty dark.
Yeah,
Um,
I bet. That's awful.
so that's some of the like haunted places I visited around here, I guess. And when you're out in the woods for a few days, it can definitely be pretty eerie. Uh,
Yeah,
that's just sort of a natural thing. You're One thing that someone says in one of my books is like if you go far enough out for long enough, you become part of the food chain. um,
yeah.
and you can kind of feel that when
Ooh,
you're out there, especially if you're in like territory with grizzly bears or mountain lions and things like
yeah.
that. So,
I always feel like out in the woods, you feel like connected to something ancient, and
hmm
that's a good thing, but also a scary thing. And the longer you're out there, the more you feel it. So I completely understand that. So tell me about your book. Let's talk more about that.
yeah, totally. So Crevasse is the story of, well, it's got three POV characters. So it's Greg and Quinn are two young mountaineers. Greg has been doing it a long time, for a young man. And
Yeah.
Quinn is his girlfriend who has sort of just started getting into it more seriously. But, she's competent and willing to try hard things. So she's out here with Greg. They're trying to climb a line on Mount Terror, which is a real mountain, in a range called the Southern Pickets, which is a very, very isolated, hard to get to mountain range. Um, they're trying to climb this really hard climb, and they start to hear strange voices and like sort of see this person in a red coat that they think might be like creeping around their campsite and stuff. So they start to see weird things like that, but they ultimately decide to, yeah, the coat looks just like that. They ultimately decide to go for the climb anyway, since they don't like see him the morning of their summit push. Um, Meanwhile, back at home, Greg's godmother, whose name is Ellie Jensen, is a search and rescue operative in Washington State and a veteran of the military. So she's a good friend of Greg's dad. That's why she's his godmother, obviously. Um, and she agrees that she's going to go look for Greg and Quinn because they haven't made contact or come back. She's not really overly concerned at first because she knows that if you go on a big expedition like to the Southern Pickets, where it takes basically 2 days just to get there, and then you add
Yeah.
a climb on top of it, that it's pretty normal to be a day or two late. So she's optimistic at first, but of course, the closer she gets, the weirder it gets, and the more things start to become unsettling.
Very cool. That sounds awesome. Creepy. Also, this is the blurb for Crevasse, and you can find it on Amazon. As always, all of his links will be in the description of the video if you want to check out Crevasse. Here are some blurbs. Are these from people who have read it or reviewers or?
Yes, the ones I sent you. So Robert is he runs Spooky House Press, and he is up for the Stoker Award for his novel The Triangle. It's a
Okay.
YA horror, and then I recently also featured his new novel. It's called The Vile Thing We Created. That's kind of a, I would say, it's focused on postpartum depression kind of horror, and sort of
Oh,
the dark side of having a child, but with a supernatural
okay.
twist. It's really good. So if you're into that kind of thing, exploring those sort of like darker sides of the family kind of themes, I would recommend it highly.
Very cool. And then, okay, we have Booking with Janelle.
Yep, that's a book reviewer. Just I'm not sure how she found it, but she did. So
Did
I'm fortunate for the people who read this book. I really appreciate it.
I already put this one up there?
Nope, that's
Or-
SK. Um, had her on our podcast a little while ago. She is a horror author of the Crossroads series, which is about a guy who he's a medium, but he doesn't really have control over it or anything. So it's sort of like using ghosts as a representation of mental illness. It's a really good story.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, highly recommend the Crossroads series, following Logan's journey from SK. She's really good. And we are ramping up to do a co-writing project together. We'll see if it comes to fruition, but I am
Oh,
optimistic about it. So that would be really exciting.
that's exciting. So I was going to ask you about that. First, I want to talk to you. You have other short stories that are out. So
hmm
tell me a little bit about those, and then we'll talk about your future projects.
Yeah. So most of my stories that are out right now are going to be collected in my collection, Blue Rare and Other Short Stories, it's called. You can also find that on Amazon, but on Amazon you have to buy it. If you want it for free, just come join my newsletter. I give it to you for free if you do that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and there's
All right,
11
and that
stories in
will
there.
also be linked.
Nice.
And are they like themed together, or are they just random? How are they? How's that working?
Thanks for asking. They are all over the place. Um, so how they came to fruition, actually, when I first started about 3 years ago, taking writing like as a job, I did this project. I called it Cryptid Cage Match. So I would put two cryptids up, and I would say who would win in a fight between, say, a vampire and a werewolf, right? And then
Right.
I would have people vote, and then whatever one wins, I write a story about that monster.
Oh,
Um,
that's awesome.
yeah, it was really fun. I want to do it again someday when I have more time, but and like can, make it more feasible for myself. It was a challenge though. It was a really good challenge. I wrote a story a month for a year, and that's where
Wow.
all of these come from. And I used monsters from all over the world. So I did a couple like regional kind of battles, like I did an Ahuitzotl and a Siguapa, which are both from Central America.
Okay.
And some things like that. I get a couple creatures from the Philippines, like the Danog, which is kind of like a vampire, except for
Right.
they were never human or anything. They're like a different, species, I guess you would say, or a different
Yeah.
kind of being altogether. Um, but yeah, that's where all the stories come from. So there's stories from all over the place, and uh, they're all horror stories, but they're all kind
So
of based
basically,
on one
all
cryptid.
cryptids, though.
hmm That would be the
Okay,
theme.
that's
Yeah,
very cool.
cryptids for sure.
That's really big right now. People are really into all things cryptids. So, If you guys want to read that for free, you can join his newsletter. I'm sure you can find it on his Twitter, which will be linked and also tagged when I share the episode on Twitter myself. So, about your future writing projects, you said you're going to be working with, I'm sorry, I forgot her name.
Oh, SK.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a project that's in the works. I won't talk about it too much though because we haven't technically started writing it. We have outlined it a bit and, like said, we want to do it, but that's where we're at with that. It's what I hope. I hope to get it going later this year, but it'll probably be a while before it's available. However, the second book in the Crevasse is going to be a trilogy. Crevasse. The second book in that trilogy is finished right now, so I'm shopping it around, um, and we'll see where that goes. I'm still deciding where I'm going to go with it. I'm going to try for a couple agents, but if the agents I like don't bite, then I'm going to go to a small press, and if none of them bite, then I'll self-publish it like I did Crevasse.
Okay. I was
So
going to
I'm
say,
not sure yet.
you have some out with the press, do you not? Or
I
you
have
said you were with, sorry, go ahead.
Oh yeah. I have two short stories that just this year were published by different lit magazines. But
Oh, okay.
Crevasse was done with a hybrid publisher, and now it's basically just owned by me. So it was sort of like self-published, but they help you get it to the finish line, basically.
Okay. Okay, I see. So is that something you might be interested in doing again or
No, I probably won't do that again, honestly. There's a lot of reasons for that, and mostly you have to put so much money in up front as a self-publishing author or with a hybrid press, um, where going to a smaller press and stuff, they kind of help you take care of the back end, the editing and some of the marketing and printing costs and
yeah.
stuff. So I'm kind of looking to move in that direction with the second book in the series, and hoping that somebody will be, down to maybe pick up Crevasse too. But if they don't, I'll keep it self-published and just be a hybrid author. That's what I ultimately want to be, a hybrid author at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, I've done that. I've got some short stories out with a small press, and then I have my original trilogy that's fantasy that I self-published myself. But all of my horror stuff at the moment is out with a small press, which is actually who sponsors my podcast is Quill and Crow. So
Oh,
that's who I'm
cool.
with right now. Yeah. So, but I'm working on a short story collection that's all mine that I will likely self-publish. I'm not sure. That's what I'm leaning towards, but first I have to finish it. So,
Yeah. Collections are hard to sell too. Um,
yeah,
it's a good thing to self-publish a lot of the time, I think. I like Quill and Crow. They're awesome. I submitted a story to them. Didn't get accepted, but it was, yeah, I definitely like them. They're at the top
well,
of my list.
keep writing to them because they have a lot of anthologies out this or coming out this year. So
Oh yeah, I
keep
have an
that.
eye on them for sure.
They're a great place to work with. So, tell me more about your podcast. What do you guys do on it? What's it all about?
Yeah, Fermented Fiction. Um, it kind of came about because I'm not very good at social media. And I wanted a way to create kind of like consistent social content and to connect with the author community. You probably know something about this,
Yeah,
but podcast is a great way to like just talk to people.
yeah,
Um, and if you're not good at like typing your conversations, then you need to like get in a room with somebody or a virtual room at the very least.
yeah,
So that's where it came about. My brother and I started it just to talk about movies and books, and it used to be called Sinister Soup back then. And since we've become sponsored by the Cascade Writers, now we're Fermented Fiction. And sort of the format, it's kind of like a debate game show. I would say is the best way to summarize it. We stick to genre fiction, so it's sci-fi, fantasy, or horror. And every week we choose a book, a movie, or a show. We're not exclusive to books. Um,
yeah.
but we do at least one book a month. And then we try to keep it like one fantasy, one sci-fi, one horror every month.
Right.
Um, so then we roll two d20s. High roll defends the book, movie, or show, no matter what we actually think. Low roll attacks it, no matter what we actually think. We do that for 10 minutes. And then once the timer goes off, we do our beer of the week segment where we feature like a local brewery or a local beer,
Very cool.
either from Washington or Montana, because we all like beer. And we also have a sponsor with Special Brews. They're a specialty bottle shop in Linwood, Washington, and they give
Oh,
us all our
nice.
beer for free. So that's pretty sweet.
Awesome.
Yeah,
That is a good thing.
it's a good deal. And then we spend the rest of the show, usually an episode's about an hour, um, just talking about fun facts and debating what we actually think. So it's kind of fun.
Oh,
You
yeah.
get to see the flip side a lot of the time. If one of us, it's pretty common, obviously, for someone to have to debate the opposite side of their true feelings. And then
Yeah.
we spend a lot of time talking about it. And then once per month, we have a featured author of the month. Uh, and we've had lots of cool people on. We've had like MJ Kuhn, who wrote Among Thieves. Al Makatsu has been on, uh, who wrote, The Fervor and The Hunger and The Deep, um, and Red Widow. Uh, we had Johnny B. Truant, Sean Platt, bunch of really cool authors. But and we recently, who did we just had? We had just had James Sutter. He's super awesome. The creator of Pathfinder, or co-creator.
Yeah.
So that was really fun, and he just coming out with a YA romance novel called Dark Hearts. So if you're into like romance YA that takes place in like a rock and roll setting, it looks pretty awesome. So yeah, he's doing his
Yeah.
launch party
I
in
think
Seattle.
I have a lot of watch or some viewers that are into that, that would be into that. Yeah. I don't read
Nice.
romance myself. I'm not against it, and I really respect people who can write it because I cannot.
Hmm.
I just can't. But yeah, I know I have a lot, or I have viewers. I don't have a lot of viewers, but I have viewers that are into that. So that sounds awesome, though, in the rock and roll setting. I
Oh
do
yeah,
like that.
and it's coming from a place of knowledge because he's been in like 4 metal bands.
Nice.
He's done everything. He's a crazy person.
That's
But yeah,
awesome.
if you're in the Seattle area and you like romance and rock and roll and you wanna meet the co-creator of Pathfinder, he's doing his book launch party June 6th in Seattle.
Sweet. So you kind of came on because I asked for people who were into horror and who were horror creators, content creators, paranormal content creators. And so I'm guessing that you're a big fan of horror movies.
I am. I am a fan of horror movies. I wouldn't say I'm like a junkie, like a lot of people are, but I read a lot of horror and I watch a lot of horror for sure.
So what's your favorite?
Favorite horror movie?
Yeah.
Hmm. I have like kind of two answers for that. So I would
Okay.
say my favorite horror movie that is taking itself very seriously is The Witch, Robert
Okay.
Eggers. He's awesome. Um, and my favorite like horror movie for just straight entertainment value is Cabin in the Woods. Um, I
That's
love
my
that movie.
favorite.
It's so good.
That
It's so good.
oh my gosh, that's mine too. I
Yeah.
love that you said that.
Nice.
My favorite serious one is probably opera, Dario Argento.
Mm,
I
I
like
haven't seen
Suspiria
that.
too, but I think opera's better. I do.
Nice.
I just I do. But yeah. So yeah, Cabin in the Woods is my favorite entertainment value.
It's
That
brilliant.
ending was too good.
I love Drew Goddard. Yeah, he's an awesome director. And that opening scene in Cabin in the Woods is one of my favorite scenes in all of cinema, where they're just talking about like baby proofing a house. Um,
Yeah.
it's just so awesome because it just like establishes how twisted the world's gonna get.
I know. It's such a genius movie.
Hmm.
So do you like the really bad horror movies?
Sometimes I don't have a whole lot that are like memorable to me, but I have watched a fair share of the Sci-Fi Channel.
Like Creeper
Back in, we
Feature?
used to watch a lot of those, like I don't know, Super Gator and Giant Piranha and all those kind
Yeah.
of things.
As
Um,
like we watch one every week with me and like on like online community. So We've seen a ton of really bad horror movies.
Nice. I think
Yeah.
the most recent one I watched that was really bad was called like The Lawnmower Man. Have you seen that
Oh
one
my
by
god.
chance?
No, but I need
It's
to.
it's exactly what it sounds like. It's not good. It's a
Mhm.
groundskeeper that goes on a killing spree. But yeah, it was
Exactly.
pretty terribly funny.
Last week we watched The Rage. Have you seen that one? It's like body horror zombie movie.
Mm-mm.
It's really gross. Body horror, but also really bad acting. And there's just some
Mm-hmm.
killer vultures going around eating people.
Okay.
It's a bad movie, but so good.
Yeah. I went
Yeah.
to well, I'm actually wearing the shirt. Crypticon, which is a big horror
Nice.
festival in Washington, in Seattle, and they had a film festival there. There was a lot of like body horror and uh indie stuff. So, it a lot of it is like pretty good but has a low budget, and some of it
Yeah.
isn't the best. But you never know what you're gonna get in an indie film festival. It's always a lot of fun.
That sounds fun. We don't really have a lot of horror cons in my area. So I want to go to one because I do SFX makeup and I love just like practical graphics. I'm not big in CGI unless it's bad CGI and then I enjoy it. But
Yeah.
so I really want to go to a horror con so I can just like dress up and do the whole thing. That sounds so fun.
It's really fun. Yeah. Well, if you can make it to Seattle, I'm always at Crypticon every year, so it would be a lot of fun. I think I'm doing a panel next year. I'm not sure what on, but I should be. I'll have a table and everything. So yeah,
Awesome. Maybe
Eh,
I will by next year I'll be able to.
they do a lot of makeup stuff at Crypticon. They do a lot of special effects and makeup, and they bring in a bunch of people for that specifically. They had like, I think they had 5 or 6 workshops on it this year. And it was pretty
Oh
awesome.
really?
Hmm.
I do a lot. I've just started learning in the last year, almost 2 years now, and I'm all
Nice.
self-taught. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, and I do. My favorite is the bloody stuff and the wounds and all of that. Uh, a lot of people are like, "Your pictures creep me out," but I'm like, I like to do that. I'm not a glam makeup person.
No, that's what it's all about, creeping people out a little bit.
Yeah. So, what horror movies do you not like? Like, what's your seen them, done with them, you never want to see them again?
Mm. It is gore for me. I'm not a gore fan, frankly. I appreciate it as an art form, especially from the makeup artist point of view. Some things people can do with makeup is absolutely mind blowing. Um, but yeah, it's not. And I frankly, if it's not paranormal or supernatural, you're like 90% likely to lose me. Um,
Yeah, I
what
respect
I
that.
really hate, my biggest pet peeve is when something acts like it's going to be paranormal and then at the end it's just people. I'm not a fan
Yeah,
of that. I don't like that.
I don't like that either. So, do
Especially
you
when
have
they
any
like,
in mind?
what was the one I just recently watched like 2 in a row and I was really bummed out. One was like, it was directed by Casey Affleck. What was it called? I can't remember. I just watched 2 in a row though, literally, and they were both like kind of billed as paranormal or supernatural. Like it was hinted that there was something out there in the woods, kind
Yeah.
of thing, and it just turned out to be a serial killer both times. And I was like,
Oh,
I hate
that
that.
sucks.
Don't
Yeah.
tell me there's ghosts. Don't give me this like the ghosts of my past thing.
Right.
I want to see real ghosts or real monsters. I like I like there to be that supernatural paranormal element to it. I'm a big
Yeah.
monster and ghost nerd, so
Yeah. I like the supernatural too. I really can't stand when a movie has an excellent concept and then they just biff it. Lights Out really just pissed me off because it
oh,
was such a
lights out,
great
yeah.
concept, and they just
Hmm.
it could have been done so well.
That's a great example. Another good example is like The Village by Shyamalan, I think. Um,
Yeah,
I really like, again, that was like, we thought it was supernatural and it isn't. It's just people like in this weird Shyamalan scenario where these people live in this forest and never leave, and so they're 2 centuries behind. But that movie like turned me off Shyamalan for like a few movies, and luckily for me, it was the right time to check out of Shyamalan for a few movies
Yeah,
and then
yeah.
come back.
Yeah, I think his last one, I kind of liked it. But I'm kind of a nerd for the whole Four Horsemen concept. So I liked it. I think I know a lot of people didn't like it or thought it could be better, but I'm I'm big into the Four Horsemen concept and any even like what was that serial killer movie? Horse I think it was just called Horseman, but it was like
Mhm.
Dennis Quaid or something, but any kind of like representation of that, I'm into it. So I like that one.
Yeah. I like I didn't mind it either, although I am definitely partial to the Tremblay book. She had a lot less ambiguity, or a lot, sorry, I should say, more ambiguity in it. It
Oh,
was
okay.
a lot less clear. Uh, you know, I felt like Shyamalan, ironically, who's known for kind of ambiguity and twists, um, made it pretty clear like this definitely was happening. The characters definitely made the choice. It
Yeah.
definitely affected the course of the world. I didn't get that as much from the book. The book was much more like stay. It kept you in the dilemma. It kept you in the philosophical question of like, is it worth your
Right.
family's life to save the world of people you don't know? A lot more than the film, but it's still pretty
I'll
good
have to
though.
check I'll have to check out the book.
Recommend it. Anything by Paul Tremblay is worth a read for sure.
So while we're
Um,
talking about it, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
oh, I was gonna say something else too. What do you think about magical realism in terms of like that's something I've been discovering a little bit more where it's like it's not technically paranormal, but it's kind of dealing with the almost paranormal aspects that happen in real life. Like a good example of like magical realism horror I'm thinking of is True Detective. Did you ever watch that?
No.
It's really interesting. It is at the end of the day about like a serial killer or kind of a
Yeah.
network of like cult serial killers. But there's like this element of the supernatural to it, that like you could see real people in real life buying into to the point where it almost makes it real. And
Right.
that kind of stuff is really fascinating too. I can do that. But yeah, I don't know. I have a friend who's really into magical realism and getting into it a bit.
I kind of see how see because magical realism and fantasy is a different it's a different concept. It's a blending magic in with the real world, elements of the fantasy world in with the real world. But in horror, I see where you're going with it. It's a different, uh, almost to the point where it's paranormal, or it could be, and you're not sure.
Hmm.
Um, and I agree with you. I think that's fascinating. I thought I had an example, but I lost it in my head.
Yeah. What's a good example of magical realism in fantasy? Would you consider that like Game of Thrones or something, where early in the books it's not quite clear if magic is real, that kind of thing, or
um, so if you ever watch The Magicians,
hmm.
as far as people with fantasy, that would be because it blends worlds where elements of the real world are still there and they go to real places, but then in the back rooms of these worlds there's magic and magical worlds beyond. So that would be like fantasies, magical realism or urban fantasy.
Mm,
um
mhm, mhm.
so like magic exists, but the real world exists on top of it.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's how that works. I actually, that's my fantasy books would be considered somewhere between urban fantasy and magical realism because the real world, they're all based in Massachusetts.
Mm, mhm.
But like the regular people around don't know that magic is real, but the magic users do. So
Ah, okay.
yeah, that's how it would work in fantasy.
Nice.
Yeah. So shall we talk about some horror tropes?
Sure. Let's do it.
All right. So I'll name the trope. You tell me if you love them or hate them, and I kind of tried to cater these to the woods and camp horror and a little bit as best I could. So the first one is the shortcut through the woods, where they got a shortcut from somebody in the town, or somebody told them to take this shortcut to get wherever they're going, and it takes them somewhere remote.
Mm-hmm. I would say, so I just have to say love it or hate it.
And why?
Okay. I guess I'm going to say love it. In my NY though, I will preface it with as long as it works.
Right.
The only time that doesn't work for me is when it happens to somebody who should know better, you know? But if you're giving this to people who have never been in the area and they're basically asking for directions and they're taking it as rote that these are proper directions and it therefore leads them down the path they take. I like that. I think
Yeah.
the ritual was a great example of that.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
that is a
that
good
movie is
example.
awesome.
That is an excellent movie. What? Okay, the wisecracking sidekick.
Well, I like Cabin in the Woods, so I love it.
Yeah,
I
he's
don't
my
think
favorite.
I don't think this pump knows about money. I think it's barter gas is one of my favorite like lines in all movies
I
ever.
know. Can we
So
talk about the fact that he's like the dumb character, the stoner, but he's also the only one that knows what's going on
yeah, absolutely. I know.
and saves the day?
I love it's Marty, right? Yeah, Marty.
Yeah,
Yeah, I love Marty. He's great. So yeah, I mean, I can't, if it's a Marty, a really well-written wisecracking sidekick, he's great. Um there Everything's been done well and done bad, but overall, I think it's great to have a comedic relief, a foil to your
yeah.
POV or your protagonist. So, yeah, I'm into it. I guess I
I
love it.
also I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but the jock character in The Babysitter, he just kind of runs around without a shirt on the whole time,
Oh,
and
yeah. Yeah, yeah.
he's the toxic jock as well as kind of the comedic sidekick, but I love his character. He cracks me up that whole movie.
It's important to have
Um,
comedic relief,
I
especially in
agree.
horror.
Yeah. What about the almost invincible monster?
Mm, that one, yeah, I guess I would say I could kind of hate on that one a little bit more. Yeah. Again, it's done well, oftentimes. And frankly, the monster in Crevasse is kind of one of those. So I can't hate on it too much. But yeah, it's just that you always know that they're going to find a way to make it not invincible, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think of if there's any examples where that doesn't happen. Can you think of any? Where they ultimately, like, don't find a way to kill the monster and it is invincible?
Uh, Cabin in the Woods. I mean, there is a
Yeah,
way they can keep them asleep, but they're like, nah,
yeah, yeah,
they don't find a way to beat them. They just,
that's true.
that's the end. So, yeah. I think
Yeah,
the only time that they don't is when uh they want to go come around to the other trope of the good guy loses.
mhm, yeah. Um, so yeah, I mean, I guess I don't, totally hate that trope or anything, but again, it can be done well, but yeah, it's I would say pretty overdone, especially if you read a lot of monster stories.
Like Michael Myers is one that I think is too much.
Yeah, Michael Myers is too much. It's especially true when the monster is a human, you know?
Yeah,
It's one thing if they are supernatural, that's a lot
yeah,
different. Um, like even, Freddy is pretty supernatural,
yeah,
but like, yeah, if you're comparing Michael Myers, like in his universe, he's about as invincible as like Emotep in The Mummy. But like Emotep actually makes more sense to me because he's a monster.
yeah,
He is a supernatural
yeah,
creature, um, and I think he's a good example of a true immortal creature. You can never actually kill Emotep,
yeah.
is which is why he comes back for three more movies. Um, And that is the true horror of the Mummy franchise, because they should have just stopped with the Mummy. It's awesome.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, the final girl.
The Final Girl. I love it. I can root for a Final Girl.
I
I
love
think
it.
you hate it. Is that what you said?
No, I love it.
Oh, you
I'm
love
here
it.
for the
Okay.
final,
Okay.
the
Yeah.
Sydney Prescotts and the um I can't remember her name from from we were just talking about it from Halloween.
Oh yeah, yeah. I can't either. I haven't watched Halloween for a while.
It's been a
Um,
long time.
I do have a shirt
Not
that
one of my
says
favorites. I do love her as an actress and as a final girl, but it's not one of my favorite franchises. So
agreed. Um, I'm in this. I'm a big Stephen Graham Jones fan. Um, so I have the Jay Daniels is my final girl shirt that was going around.
yeah,
So I do really like his take on the final girl. Is really interesting too. The Jay Daniels duology is really good.
yeah. I like to see a twist on it. But yeah, Sydney Prescott is my final girl. Although the new Scream movies, Sam Carpenter is a badass.
Absolutely, yeah, Scream is great too.
So
I love
she's
Scream.
kind of, yeah, stealing my heart lately. Okay, how about the creepy cabin?
I do kind of hate the creepy cabin just because it's like, uh, and again, like Cabin in the Woods works because it's playing on that, you know,
Yeah,
it's satirizing that. Uh,
yeah.
but yeah, overall, that's definitely not my favorite trope. If you
I
go out to a place and it makes you feel terrible, then just leave. Uh,
yeah,
It's
stay
not like
there.
it's your house, right? If it's a
Yeah,
haunted house, makes more sense to me than the creepy cabin, because in a haunted house, like, you bought that shit. Like, I
right.
I own a house. I'll tell you what, if it's haunted, I'm screwed, because like I'm stuck here for at least 5 years.
Yeah.
So like,
That makes total
um
sense. If you're on vacation and the place is gross, like just go home.
yeah. Or go get a hotel, like there's no. Reason to stay in that cabin.
Yeah.
And of
I
course
do
there's all
like
kinds of sorry, go
the
ahead.
Tucker and Dale
Oh.
versus Evil twist on the creepy cabin.
Mhm.
So when it's satirized, like you said, it works, but yeah.
Yeah.
Don't go sleep in some dirty old cabin you found in the woods.
No. It's been a long
Wow.
time since I saw a creepy cabin like movie that I genuinely thought was awesome, or,
Right.
even Knock at the Cabin, it's not about the cabin, you know.
Yeah.
It's about
We,
everything but the cabin.
yeah. We just watched one that was really terrible. Crack in the Floor.
Hmm.
We only watched it because Gary Busey was in it, and he was only in it for a few minutes. And he was hilarious. It was like I could have just watched him be crazy for like the whole movie, but they go into this cabin and it's just dirty and gross and there's blood stains everywhere and they're like, "Yeah, we're going to camp here."
Yeah, why
Why
not?
would you do that?
And like another good example of it done right, I think, is like The Ritual, right? Because
Yeah.
they weren't trying to go to the creepy cabin. They were desperate for shelter, and so they stayed in this creepy cabin. But like,
Yeah.
they certainly didn't want to, and they didn't stay
Yeah.
in there longer than they had to. They were like, "We gotta go. This place sucks." Like, uh,
Right.
and I would like to see more people do that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yellow Jackets, the series is did that. So I could see that. That's another example of it working when you
yeah,
have to.
it can work, but yeah, again, kind of like the shortcut thing. If there's a reason for them not to do it, and they do it anyway because the story needs them to, I always think that's kind of a just not the best way to write a story, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Your character's actions should make sense, and you know,
Exactly. This is one I can't stand is leaving the phones or
yeah,
bagging up your phones. Like, why would every time they do that, I know it's gonna be terrible idea.
mm-hmm. Although I do
So
have to
we're not gonna do
say,
it.
I leave my phone. I like to leave my phone behind, so I could be one of those characters in a horror movie for sure. That could happen to me.
You gotta have at least somebody with one in
Yeah,
case there's a
yeah,
serial killer.
that's true. That's true. In case
What can
there's
wait?
a not ghost that comes to kill everybody.
Exactly.
Yeah, you can't have that.
Okay, what about urban legends?
I like urban legends. I'm a folklore geek, so urban legends are oftentimes kind of the modern
I thought
folklore.
you might like
Yeah,
them.
I
Yeah,
do.
I like them too.
I love those stories that have prevailed just through straight word of mouth for their creep factor, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like everybody's heard, like, the story of, like, the girl who lets her dog out and then feels like something licking her hand and thinks it's her dog,
Oh,
and then
yeah.
finds out it's not her dog. Like, stories like that are just so, like, gross and creepy,
Yeah.
that they've, like, lived on, and, like, we have no idea where they originally came from, you know? Um,
Yeah.
so you gotta respect the clout.
Yeah. Like a Bloody Mary.
Mhm. Bloody Mary's
There's like
awesome.
a
Yeah.
million of her. Everybody claims they know what the original story came from, and nobody really does. So, yeah,
Mhm.
I like urban legends.
Yeah, me
Um,
too. Big fan.
yeah, the dying flashlight.
Yeah. The dying flashlight. I guess, I guess I kinda hate that one. Just like but again, if it's justified in the story, then fine. Um, but yeah, I don't know. That's just one of those things it's all dependent, very subjective for me.
I think if it's like a cave movie and they've been trapped for days, then it makes sense. But
Mhm.
you like have a perfectly working flashlight until things hit the fan, and then suddenly it starts blinking out. Like, okay,
Yeah, exactly.
he's like,
I don't like really anything. I call it just cuz story. But anything that is like because the story needs it to
yeah,
happen now. I pretty much never like those. So
yeah,
yeah, unless it's like because of the supernatural and you justify that like electronics don't work around this creature or whatever, that's a different
right,
thing. But if
yeah,
it's like, "Oh, now that it's dark, my battery doesn't work," that sucks, and, that's kinda lame.
yeah. That's stupid.
Yeah.
Um, cryptic townsfolk,
Cryptic townsfolk. Um,
as in Jedediah
yeah,
and Kevin in the Woods.
yeah. Um, I will say hate it because I've seen it done badly so often, and because I come from a small rural town, so I'm a little predisposed to thinking that some of those portrayals are a bit, ill-informed.
Yeah,
Um
insulting.
Yeah, insulting for sure.
Yeah,
Sometimes they work, but like if you haven't done your research on a place, it can be pretty obvious. Um, I mean, I've only watched a couple movies that were set in Montana that feel anything like actual Montana. Um,
right.
but and that also goes with like the Harbinger of Doom trope, which I really don't like. I really don't like the Harbinger of Doom
Yeah,
trope, and that kind of goes along with the cryptid townsfolk. Like if somebody warns you not to go somewhere at the start of the story, I'm already like checked out a little bit.
yeah,
That always kind of bugs me.
yeah. There are a lot better ways to foreshadow
Yeah,
and then just
absolutely.
come right out and say it.
Yeah, and you see it all the time. It's amazing how often it happens, and it's
Yeah,
just yeah, I don't know. It's weird how tropes can become so prevalent.
yeah. Daylight equals safety and dark equals danger.
Hate it.
Hate it too. Yeah,
Yep. Give me a monster that kills people in the daytime. I'm all about it.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Same. What about forbidden knowledge?
Forbidden knowledge. Like in Lovecraft Country kind of thing? Where they're just trying
Yeah.
to yeah. Um, I guess I would also kinda go with The Mummy. Um,
Any kind of cult,
uh,
like the Mummy, Lovecraft, or cult, evil cult.
yeah, I guess I love it because a lot of it goes appeals to like the history geek in me. Um,
Yeah.
but there are circumstances that I don't like. Like I don't like the trope of like the main character meets an old person of like a particular race or religion and
Yeah.
learns everything they need to defeat the monster. I don't really like that when like forbidden knowledge is easily accessible once it's needed, you know?
Yeah.
Um, but I do like tend to like historical things that have like a long history tracing back or like a deep cultural root to them with the supernatural
Yeah.
elements especially.
Cursed artifacts.
Eh, I could do without those. I'm not a big fan of like the MacGuffin trope in general. Um,
Yeah.
Cursed artifacts can be fun. I mean, I like a monkey paw story as much as the next fella.
Yeah.
Monkey paw stories are always fun. But yeah, overall, it's one of those tropes it's just like Excalibur. It's like once it's a tangible artifact that's causing all the problems, it's a little too insular to me.
Yeah. I agree. I think it's fun for the horror comedy genre, but
Totally.
uh, to take it seriously, I think it's kind of hokey.
Yeah, and I've seen it done well, but overall, it's not my favorite trope. That's for sure.
Yeah. The hero dies in the ending, or it seems to win but fails.
Hmm. I love that one. I'm as much as I like a final girl, I am also pretty. I like when it isn't expected. Anyway. Um.
I was gonna say I don't like that it's become so popular as a twist ending
Hmm.
because now it's so popular, but I do like it if you don't see it coming.
Yeah, I do too. I vastly prefer that for sure. Um. And as long as it's rooted in the story, as long
Yeah,
as like the thematic elements of the story benefit from your hero dying or failing. If your story is, for example, about the inevitability of death, then maybe your hero should die at the end,
yeah,
and it kind of like wraps it all up and buttons it up. But it has to be rooted in the thematic elements of the story because otherwise people don't want the hero to die generally if you've written a good hero. Um,
yeah. Um,
so yeah.
an example, Friday, sorry, Nightmare on Elm Street, the original.
Mhm.
I kind of hate the ending when you think she's gotten away and
Mhm.
she carries on, and then it turns out he's not dead. Um, I know you're building it to another one, but I kind of hate that and the way they did it. I guess.
Well, and I agree with you, and I think that one's not as good because it does feel like they're doing it because they're making another one, you
Yeah,
know? And that's a completely different thing than like the horror is that this thing is still alive, that this thing will
right.
never leave. Like It Follows did an interesting take on that, I thought. Um, It Follows
Yeah,
was like definitely not my favorite
I
by
was
any
gonna say
means. Not a fan.
it wasn't terrible. Um, uh, it had some scary moments or spooky moments, but I did not understand the utter hype around the movie. It gets
Yeah.
a lot of hype.
I do think it was a bit overhyped. I definitely didn't think it was awesome. I haven't watched it more than once, and I watch all my favorite horror movies like 100 times.
Oh,
Um,
same.
uh, but I liked the creeping dread factor that that movie had, and it made
Yeah,
sense for that monster to carry on. Um, One of my favorite horror movies is Sinister, and I think that's a really good example of how to kill your protagonist effectively. Um,
yeah,
because that movie was about obsession and the inability to let something go and the inability to sacrifice your own legacy for the happiness of your family. And ultimately,
right.
he ends up being sacrificed for something else because he can't let go.
Yeah,
Um,
totally.
so I thought that movie was a really good example of like how to kill your protagonist and make it matter.
Yeah, that's a good example. How about found footage?
I like found footage as a format because I think it makes filmmaking doable for a lot of people. So I like it on
Yeah,
like a semantic level. Um, and
yeah,
when it's done well, it's cool, but it's way overdone. Way overdone.
yeah. I think
And
so
that's a
too.
double-edged sword, right? It's kind of like self-publishing, right? I'm really glad we can self-publish, and there's
Yeah.
hundreds and thousands of amazing self-published authors out there. Um,
Yes.
but for every great self-published indie book, there's like 100 really bad ones, and that's
Yeah.
just the fact of the matter. If everybody can publish everything all the time, especially with AI now, it's like a weird world out there in the self-publishing world. And I'm a big
Yeah.
proponent self-publishing, like not knocking it by any means. I'm a self-published author, but the found footage kind of does the same thing for filmmaking. It opens it up to anybody can make a movie now, and there's a lot of really good found footage movies, a lot that even flew under the radar, um,
Yeah.
but there's a lot of really bad ones too.
Yeah. And no, you make a very valid point. That's why you have to have the quality
Mm-hmm.
and people
Mm-hmm.
willing to take the time to make quality, even if they're doing it on their own.
Mm-hmm.
That's why those of us who are trying to build up the indie publishing world are hiring editors and graphic
Mm-hmm.
artists and doing the work that it takes to make these quality books. But there's always going to be people who just pump it out and put it out there.
Yeah, and a lot of the times those people still do fine,
Yeah.
and then they keep doing it, so you never know. Um, But yeah, I mean, so that's what I'll say about found footage. I like it in principle, not always in application.
Yeah. The final scare.
The final scare. Oh, yeah, I could do without that. Um, I would, although I like the ending to like Cabin in the Woods, I would still say that's more in the kill your protagonist trope than it is the final
Yeah.
scare trope. I don't like when they like a final jump scare at the end. Yeah, not a big fan of that.
Yeah. I really like it in Scream when they make fun of it. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're like, just wait for it. It's coming. So that I like, but in serious application, like I can also do without it.
Yeah. I feel like most of the bad tropes are the best for satirical application. And
Yeah, I agree.
Scream's like the Scream's one of the legends when it comes to horror satire, no question.
Yeah,
One of the best ever made.
they really are. Honestly, it's my favorite serial killer uh franchise, so I'm always gonna chalk it up. And a lot of
Bar none.
people are gonna talk it down, but I'm like, that's fine.
Psh.
Just don't get it. It's fine.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Splitting up.
Splitting up. Yeah.
Good
I
old Fred and Daphne and Scooby Doo.
Yep, exactly. No, not the biggest fan of splitting up either. It usually doesn't make sense. It's very rare when it makes sense. And it seems like in most movies, when they split up, it makes the least sense possible.
Yeah.
It's like that commercial that was out a couple years ago where the people are running around and they're like, "Let's hide behind the chainsaws." Do you remember that
Yes.
commercial? That commercial was awesome, by the way. But it's such a good
I love
commercial.
that commercial. Why can't we get in the running car? He's like, are you insane?
Yeah. But that's about how dumb it feels sometimes when people split up. It's always when
Yeah.
they're already like in trouble. And
Yeah.
it's what are you doing? Stay together.
Yeah. Two people have already been killed on their own, and they're like, let's split up and look for them. And you're like, they're already gone, dude.
Yeah, yeah. Good luck with that.
What about the blind monster?
Blind monster. What do you mean by the blind monster?
I can't see you.
Oh,
So
just
if you
literally
let,
blind.
like the Jurassic Park T Rex, just don't move.
Mm-hmm. I think that one can be pretty fun. They did good with it in like the Descent. Um, and where again that was justified by the lore, right? These
Right.
creatures,
I
it
mean,
made
the,
sense they couldn't see you. So
yeah.
um and I think that adds a different element of terror that isn't always present. Like I don't know if you've ever tried not to breathe or sit still for a long time while something was looking for you, but that sounds absolutely terrifying, you know? So
Yeah.
I can get on board with the level of suspense. That can really ratchet it up pretty quickly. And so I think it's
I think
effective.
so too because like trying not to pant or uh, make noise when you're freaking out is it's impossible. So yeah, The Descent is terrifying. By the way, that
It
movie.
is.
Ugh,
The last
I'm
podcast I was on, that was the movie we talked about.
ugh, I'm so claustrophobic, and I just can't with that movie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's super creepy.
Ugh. Okay, the monologuing villain.
Hate it.
Me too.
I'm not even gonna. I don't have anything else to say about that.
Uh, I was just making fun of my husband the other day because he was like saying he was going to do something. And I'm like, are you going to stand there and monologue to me like a villain? You want to tell me your whole dastardly plan? I'm just going to
Exactly.
run away.
Have you ever seen One Punch Man?
No, I have not.
It is hilarious. It's a satire of anime, basically. Um,
Oh, okay.
but he's basically a superhero. He could kill everybody with one punch, no matter how strong they are. He's just like insanely powerful. He's basically a god amongst other deities. Um, but that happens all the time in One Punch Man. They'll try to like do their monologue, and he just kills them because he doesn't want to hear it. He doesn't have time for it. So it's fun.
I'm going to have to watch that. That sounds good. All right, final one, the clumsy escape.
I like the clumsy escape because the clumsy escape is real. I don't like if you're trying to run away in the mud and the dark and you're trying to scramble up a hill or you're trying to like if you're terrified, like you're not gonna be graceful unless you're a Navy SEAL. But like most people aren't.
I
So I'm about it.
uh, I hate it. I hate it
You
so
hate
much.
it?
I hate it. It
Okay.
always seems like it's a star athlete, some jock in the high school, and then suddenly somebody's after them and they can't run
Mhm. Mhm.
and they're running through the forest and looking behind them the whole time. Like then maybe run into a tree or something instead of tripping over a root because you're not looking where you're going, but like you're just tripping over grass or air or nothing.
Yeah.
So frustrating.
I can definitely understand that. Like with all my answers, if it's not justified, like in that scenario, then yeah, definitely lame. Um, like a good example I can think of is I don't know if you've read the Blade itself. It's a fantasy novel, Joe Abercrombie.
Mm-mm.
Um, it's really good. If you like grim dark fantasy. But the opening scene is like one of the most BA fighters in the series. But he gets ambushed at night by like a couple. Basically, they're this world's version of goblins. But he gets ambushed like at night by like three of them when he's asleep. And his fight with them is like really clumsy and like he barely survives this like little encounter, you know, because he like wasn't awake and he wasn't ready and it's muddy and he's like slipping and falling and I
That
just
makes
like
sense.
it made sense and I loved it because it opens with that and then as you go through the story you're like, oh, this guy's really like badass, but that opening scene is just all the more awesome because it feels so real to me. Because I've
Right.
definitely been in a couple like scuffles outside and it's no, they don't look like they do in the movies, they're short, they're ugly, they look like they
Yeah,
do in like Breaking Bad. Breaking Bad has awesome fight scenes. Like those are so realistic. It's like that's what two people who don't know
I
how to
guess that
fight
makes
look like
sense.
when they fight.
If you ever seen teenage girls going at
Yeah,
it.
exactly. There's nothing like coordinated about it, It's
Yeah,
clumsy and ugly and yeah, it doesn't look good.
yeah. I guess
So
that
yeah.
makes sense. From that point of view, I can see the clumsy escape, but just like the guy or I know what you did last summer. Both of
Mhm.
those guys are athletic and they just trip and fall all over the place. Like the beauty queen, I get it. But the two guys who are athletic trying to run and tripping all over everything, like it's a little it doesn't make much sense. And that one guy's like boxing when he gets caught and then he gets his butt kicked. And like
Yeah.
you were literally in there training to fight and you don't even throw a punch.
Yeah. No, I
So
agree with that. Anytime you ruin something that you set up because
yeah,
the story needs that character to fail for whatever reason, you're not doing your own narrative justice or your
yeah.
characters. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's still I still love I Know What You Did Last Summer because it's dumb and it's silly and it's funny, but it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I agree.
But I also watch terrible horror movies and love them. So,
Yeah. Nothing wrong with that.
okay, so now you can plug your socials, your books, your podcast. This is
Okay.
your window of opportunity. Tell us what you want us to know about you.
Will do. Thank you. So I'm Clay Vermulm. You can find me on Twitter at Clayton Vermulm. Same handle on Instagram. I'm not on Instagram much, so Twitter's like if you actually want to interact with me in any way, I'll be on Twitter. My preferred method of reaching my readers is always my newsletter. You can find it on my website. There's a contact me page, and then on the about me page, there's also a link to the newsletter. If you join that, you get a free ebook and you hear from me every month. I'm also very responsive to emails and stuff, so I love newsletter communication. Um, my book Crevasse is on Amazon, as is my short story collection Blue Rare and Other Short Stories. I'll be in 2 anthologies coming out later this year. When I have dates, I will tell everybody that's on the newsletter about them, and then I'll say it on Twitter as well. So yeah, Twitter, newsletter, those are the places to find me at Clayton Vermulm on Twitter. And then clayvermulmfiction.com is my website. There you can get my newsletter. And then Fermented Fiction is the podcast, and you can find us everywhere podcasts exist. So we'd love to have you as a listener. Come on over and listen to us drunkenly debate some movies.
Sounds good. And as always, this will be in the description so you can find him easily. Um, if you want to know more about my sponsors, you can find them at quillandcrowpublishinghouse.com. You can get merch, all of their shirts, jewelry, books, everything. It's all high quality and amazing. You can get that at thecrowshop.com. That's SHOPPE. You can find them on Twitter at Quill and Crow Publishing House, on Instagram at Quill and Crow Publishing House, and on TikTok at Quill and Crow Publishing House. If you want to know more about me, I'm on Twitter at Jax2_0. You can check out my website at jslarimore.com. I'm on Amazon under jslarimore.com. You can find my books. I have short stories with Quill and Crow Publishing House on Amazon and a poetry collection. And hopefully by the end of the year, I'll have a horror story collection coming out for you guys. You can also find me on Instagram at JS Larimore and on TikTok at Jax the Tiny Raptor. Thank you, Clay, for joining me. This was a lot of fun. I had a great time talking to you. Um, I hope that we'll be able to stay in touch, and I'm going to go check out your books. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you so much. And yeah, let's stay in touch. Maybe we can collaborate on something. That'd be a lot of fun.
That would be awesome. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Make sure you like, subscribe, and click that notification button so you don't miss any episodes. Thank you for joining us on Ravens and Writing Desks.